Welcome to our show. This is our first episode for season 2 of Take Good Care. And we are in the studio, our physical studio space. We have done some testing and recording and preparation, and now we are here and we are excited and we are ready to go to kick off this season to see what this year is going to bring. Welcome to Take Good Care,
an endeavor of Peachtree City Obstetrics and Gynecology. Our aim and mission is to serve as a source of vital information and discussion for women of all ages, races, and walks in life.
I'm Dr. Miranda Williams.
I'm Dr. Deanna Guthrie. And I am Dr. Karen Green. Welcome to our show.
For this first show, we're actually doing something on the topic finding your voice. All three of us, I think, as well as the world, really has kind of gone through an evolution, I would say, over the last several months. I think the pandemic and everything else that was going on in 2020 caused a lot of us to reevaluate priorities, things that are important, the direction we want to see our lives going in this next season of life, as well as we were beginning to think about how we wanted things to evolve for the season of our show, Take Good Care. So with this second season, my partners and I, we often communicate outside the office, after office hours. And so I was having a conversation, I think it was on text, Dr. Green and myself, we've developed a love of chucks, all things chucks. We have high tops, we have low tops. We have platform, we have flats. We have leather, we have canvas. So we're just loving our chucks. And so I had recently purchased my newest high top pair of sneakers that I absolutely love because I said they look like little hippie shoes because they have embroidered flowers on there and moon and stars. And on the label, it says it's okay to wander from yourself and to discover life. And I think that's really where I found myself at this time as we go forward. And Dr. Green was saying that she and some of her other girlfriends were having similar conversations. And so we began to talk about how difficult it seems to be for women in particular to really find their voice, to rediscover identity, to rediscover purpose, focus, what's important. And then in professional circumstances or even in non-professional circumstances, personal conversations, speaking up, expressing yourself, and finding your voice. We each looked at different articles, and it talked about that there have been several studies that actually show that women are systematically seen as less authoritative, and that there are gender biases that really still shape the rules of social engagement, and that women should look at changing the environment in the room so that when we enter the room, and we express ourselves with our voice. Some of us express ourselves with our hair, with our clothing of the day, and we are speaking up and we're changing the environment in the room. So Dr. Green, why don't you go a little bit into some of the other conversations that we've all had, but some of the things that you were having with some of your other girlfriends and talking about, how we all even came to this idea and concept of the importance of finding your voice and why we wanted this to be the first episode of season 2.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I think that one of the things, as you said, that the pandemic and kind of looking at things differently has taught us is that we want to be our best selves. And so in the conversation that I had with high school friends that I've known, for 40 plus years, was what would you tell to your younger self? Because we're kind of looking at our life now as we're in our second chapter.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to live another 50 plus years. So this is the second chapter or our second act.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would you tell your younger self? How would you be different? And so the majority of us would say, be smarter about money and not be afraid to speak up. And that was a theme of, afraid to speak up. Why? Here we are as women that we talk to each other, we have conversations, but in a group setting, why is it that we're afraid to speak up?
Mhm.
Why is it that we can't say what we think and say what we feel? And I reflected on the fact that we have an all-female staff here at Peachtree City Obstetrics and Gynecology. We're proud of that. And so we feel like we empower women. And we also have this overhead paging system. So you can call people from one side of the office to the other. You don't have to walk all over the office trying to find people. You just say, so-and-so come here, so-and-so come there. And we get used to it because when you do this, you hear yourself talking.
Mhm.
I discovered that some of the newer hires, they didn't want to do that. And
Mhm.
so I asked them, well, why? You talk to each other. You have no problem. I don't like hearing myself.
Hmm.
I can honestly say I don't particularly care for hearing myself when we did our
Mm.
podcast because I am my worst critic.
Mhm.
But I wondered why that was. Why don't we like to hear our voices? Why can't we speak up? And so a lot of it goes back to what we were taught,
Mhm.
that we should be, as my girlfriends would say, invisible and not take up space.
Hmm.
We're supposed to just be in the background. We're supposed to be nurturing and caring, but never authoritative.
Hmm.
Um, and because this year has given us a lot of Zoom type meetings,
Mhm.
that if we're taught that, then if we're sitting in a Zoom meeting where it's just a bunch of figures on the screen, the people that are going to get the most airtime are usually going to be the men. Because we're not going to say what we think. We're not going to say what we feel. And when we do say it, research has shown that we tend to clarify it as if, we're not the expert on it. When
Mhm.
most of the time, 9 times out of 10, when we're in the room, we may have higher GPAs, have more experience, and have the background to say it with authority, but we're not taught to say it that way. A man will speak up whether he knows what he's talking about or not.
That's true.
My husband is famous for out talking everybody in the room.
Mhm.
And it can be annoying on a personal level, but on a professional level, it makes sense because he's going to get himself heard. One of the funny things I read was Rachel Maddow. She was on at one of these talks, and there were these very obnoxious men in the room with her. And so she stood up so they would recognize her, so they would listen to her.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. We need to stand up for ourselves, say what we think and not be afraid to say what we think
That's it.
because it's okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Guthrie, what do you
Well,
think?
I agree with everything you said. Another factor is that when we do speak up, we are seen as being angry or forceful. Where on a man, it's accepted
Mhm.
that he can
He's being
speak with his voice.
assertive.
He's being assertive,
Mhm.
but we're being
Bitchy.
difficult.
Bitchy.
Difficult.
Yes.
And sometimes, but just like when you said Rachel Maddow had to stand up, when we have to be that forceful in being heard, it can be seen negatively.
Yeah.
I have a funny experience. It was my college reunion, and I was a class officer during college, but way back when I still am, but I was extremely shy. I cannot stress the extremely enough.
Really?
Yes. And so everybody who knew me back then, I hadn't really been around, all my college friends, of course, in years, but we had a class meeting. We had a Zoom reunion. And so as part of our Zoom reunion for the weekend, we had a class meeting trying to go over some goals that the class wanted to accomplish in scholarships and things like that. And so everybody was kind of, giving their opinions and everything like that. And I was speaking up. I just, like I said, me now, it didn't seem as anything different. But it was funny that after we had the class meeting, one of my friends, we were having to exchange. I was the secretary, so I was taking notes and everything. We were exchanging information, and he was like, "Wow, Deanna, I just didn't even know that was you." I was like, "You were just like talking, like you were just speaking up," and and I had to laugh because I know that what they remembered of me was not who was there in that Zoom meeting.
It's the new you.
It's the new, like you said, it's my older self, more mature, able to recognize situations that you do need to speak up. When you were younger, you tend to say, well, I can, but I don't have to, and it's okay if I don't. But now, now with a being more mature, you recognize that you should speak up. So it is true. And in reading one of the articles, they were saying it's how you say things too. It's not saying I think or I feel, or you start out you're always starting out your sentences with maybe. All those things that convey uncertainty. Whereas, like you said, men will just say, I believe and I think and we need to. They come out with things like that. But of course, if we were to present ourselves that way, it would be negative. So,
yeah, I think we're, unfortunately, those gender biases as young girls, that assertiveness is not encouraged in little girls. In fact, it's probably discouraged. I'm so thankful that, my parents and my village, my aunts and my grandparents, because, I think I've told this story before, it's been said that I came out of the womb talking, and I haven't stopped since. And so I remember as a little girl, just running my mouth. I was just always, taking charge of things and speaking up, and growing up in an environment where that was actually encouraged and supported and, applauded, I think really stood well for me as I got older, because finding my voice and using my voice was not something that I struggled with, but I think that's a very unique thing for most girls, especially of our generation.
Yeah.
I think this younger generation, no,
they're going to speak up.
They're going to say whatever they want to say. But I think for those who are our generation and older, that really wasn't encouraged or applauded. And as you all were talking, it also made me think that it really goes into personal relationships as well, not just in the workplace, not just in professional settings, but I think as women, oftentimes, even in our personal relationships and our personal communication styles, we're still socialized to be okay. I'll just make do, It's not really what I want, but it's going to be okay. I'll make it work. And Deanna and I, we have a couple of girlfriends, and it's, and even for us, because I think we're fairly accomplished professionally, but we'll see them, and they are these women, they're like, I'm going to get what I want, in my relationships. And they're very straightforward with their communication. They will let us know as their girlfriends. They let men that they may be involved with and or their husbands now. So they're very definitive in their communication style. And I think that's really worked out for them in a good way, even in personal relationships. Because being able to communicate effectively is so important just in life. And it's sad that women in a professional setting who may say the exact same thing as a man is seen as being difficult. You're being pushy or bossy, or you don't know your place. I'm like, okay, but I'm a surgeon. He's a surgeon.
What's the
difference? And so even now, 25 plus years later in medicine, working in the same institution, that's what gets frustrating, is because you feel like you're still fighting those same battles to be recognized on the same level as your colleague, because you're all on the same level in terms of our professional accomplishments and what we can do. So we speak up, and I think it's good that we encourage each other. I think we are very supportive of each other. When we're having frustrations, we'll say, well, we need to speak up, and we need to let people know what we think, how we feel, what we think should be happening in these scenarios from a professional standpoint, and to still use our voice and to speak up and to change the room, to change the room, which is why diversity and inclusion and all that is becoming such a huge deal, because I think when you have women, people of color, as well as age, differences in the room, the conversation that you can have is so much more productive.
Right.
Because you're not getting everything from one perspective.
Right.
You're able to really get a better understanding of the impact of whatever you're discussing that crosses so many different lines.
I think men are taught in a certain way, and so if we go against the grain in how we speak up and how we say things, it's considered wrong, or it's considered unacceptable, or it's considered pushy, aggressive, and all the other bad words, which is really kind of sad, because of where it's coming from. And so, we want to have a place in the room. We want to be present so that people understand that no, there's nothing wrong. It's just different. And it's okay to say it that way because we're saying the same things. I'm often amazed, just as Dr. Guthrie was saying, that when you present something and you say maybe, but if she were talking to a patient about a surgery she's going to perform,
Right.
she would give them the facts.
Exactly.
And they would say, okay, Dr.
Okay.
Guthrie, because I trust you.
I trust you.
And
Yeah.
they should, because she's the expert in her field.
Right.
There's,
Exactly.
there's no reason not to believe her.
Exactly.
And she doesn't say, maybe this will happen. She says, this is how it's going to go. This is what I'm going to do.
These are the
And
options. These are the possibilities.
Right.
Mhm.
And I've done so many of these that I am the
Mhm.
expert. I know what
Mhm.
I'm doing. I am the surgeon.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it's so important, and I think again that's why we thought about doing this as the first episode for this second season of the show, is because so much of last year, we talked about it a little bit before, when we initially thought about doing this adventure, we were thinking more, that it'll be a great place for us to have discussions from a medical nature, from a women's health standpoint, from a gynecologist standpoint, to educate and inform not only our patient base, but just the community at large. And then because of the circumstances of everything that was going on around us from a political and a social standpoint, we pivoted and we reacted and responded to those things that were happening around us, that were affecting us, just like it was affecting everyone else. And I think in an even greater way, we found another facet of our voice, and I think that's the other thing, as we've talked about this show, how it is evolving, how we're evolving, what we're looking to do in this second season. We are not one-dimensional people. We're not one-dimensional women. So our show is hopefully going to reflect that. We're going to talk about medicine. We're going to talk about those things that we know. Gynecologists, Dr. Green and Dr. Guthrie, are also interested in doing more specific urogynecology types of procedures and working in that aspect. We also do a lot of work on hormonal issues, women who are going through menopause, but we also deal with our millennials. So we're looking at women across the full spectrum of life, especially their reproductive years, but that's not all we have to say.
right.
And I think about, some of the things that were going on last year, and you had people who may have been experts in a particular field, and I'm thinking of sports, and because they were having comments about some of the social and political things that were going on, they were told to shut up and play ball.
Yeah, stay in their lane.
Stay in your lane, excuse me?
Right. As if that's the only lane they have.
Right.
They're not parents and fathers,
Right.
and they're multifaceted too.
Right.
But if you see a person as one-dimensional, then you would say a comment like,
Right.
shut up and dribble.
Right. So I'm like, how can you limit my voice?
Right. No.
How can you tell me what my voice is only good for?
Yeah. You can't.
You can't.
And
Or they do, but we can't allow it.
right.
We can't allow them to stifle our voice, because our voice may be different and our voice may be stating things that they don't agree with, but
True.
that's what makes the world.
Yeah.
That's what makes the world. Different thoughts, different opinions. I know I found a couple of little pictures. I think I sent them to you guys in email. And there was one graphic that talked about how you find your unique voice. Did you see that, Dr. Guthrie?
Mhm.
Why don't you talk about what those two little circles represent, and then what that little space in the middle?
Oh, yeah.
about how when we talk about our voice, when we talk about why
So-
it's important.
Yeah, so it's a graphic with two. It's kind of like a Venn
Venn
diagram.
Which sadly I learned from my children. I didn't know what that was, and my children explained it to me.
And so there are two circles that overlap, and on one circle it's labeled what feels natural to you. So this is something that you feel internally that's inherent to you, and then you have another circle that says what other people are not saying, and so in the middle where they both cross is where your unique voice is. So it's what you know in yourself that may not be being expressed, but that's your idea, your thoughts, your feelings,
Mhm.
and that's what you need to find. A lot of people sway all the way one end or the other,
Mhm.
but a good balance is being somewhere right there in the
Mhm.
middle.
That's your unique voice.
And I
That-
think we struggle to find that. Well, speaking for myself, I think that some days I struggle to find that. Do I really want to say what I feel and what I think based on, my background, or do I want to just sway one side or the other because it's comfortable?
Mhm.
And so I've decided that I'm going to try to be a little more uncomfortable sometimes
Mhm.
because it's okay.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
okay.
That's the growth zone when we get out of our comfort zone.
And you don't want to make somebody else uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but you can't stifle yourself.
Right.
Either.
Right.
That's the thing.
That's the thing. As women, like you were saying before, we'll take the hit. Okay, I'll be the one to just suck it up or not say anything or not feel heard or be frustrated
Mhm.
so that you will feel comfortable.
Right.
And,
Right.
And like I said, it's not always adversarial, but
Right.
everybody needs to be a little bit uncomfortable at
Right.
times.
At times.
Need to have those
Exactly.
uncomfortable conversations.
Exactly. I found some quotes as we were getting ready for today. One by Madeleine Albright, and she said, "It took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I'm not going to be silent." And I'm like, that's us. It's like, we found a new platform.
Yeah.
This show that we both, all three of us, feel is important for our own growth and evolution. And we feel that we collectively have a unique voice that we can lend to medical issues, social issues, political issues. And we're in that sandwich generation, so we've had to deal with aging parents. And so we feel like we have a unique voice that we can lend to the conversation. And Audre Lorde also had a quote where she said, "When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we're still afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just better to speak." So I was just like, I love it.
Yep.
I love it. And the last one, this is Deanna. This is our alter ego, Coco Chanel. She said, "The most courageous act is still to think for yourself out loud." So speak up.
That's so true.
Speak
That's
up.
so true.
Yeah. Say what you
I'm
feel.
still learning.
We're
to
all
do that,
learning.
It's a
you know.
process.
It's a process.
It truly is.
I don't think you ever get there. You may get more comfortable. Like now for your college reunion, you're more comfortable speaking up and more so than you were then. And that's why they were like, who is this person? Where did this Deanna come from?
So if you look at that, it's like, okay, I've come a long ways, so I can do this, whatever this is,
Mhm.
because clearly, you've come a long way in that respect. So,
I think my profession also helped me because, being the physician in the room in charge of a lot of sometimes emergent situations. I can remember. I have two funny stories. When I was a second year resident, and Dr. Williams
I was going to say,
my
I knew I was in
and Dr. Williams was my
I knew
chief.
I was in there somewhere.
I remember that we had this critical situation going on, and something needed to be done right away. It was an emergency C-section. So, Dr. Williams was my chief, and I'm looking at her like, what is she going to do? What is she going to say? And, she's kind of giving some orders or whatever. And all of a sudden, she just turned to me and she went, "Dr. Guthrie?" and that kind of like put me in charge of the room, and I was like, you know, but I did it. I did it. And then, oftentimes, like I remember when I first started in private practice and there was something going on with a patient and we all had to, we were all rushing into the room to take care of her. And so usually I'm running in and saying, what's somebody else going to do? And then I realized
You are
it's
somebody.
me. So I had to be the one to kind of speak up, give instructions and be in charge. And, with that part of my career, that truly helped me because I could be the person leading in the room, because I had to.
Because you had to.
I had to.
Because there's and a lot of times in obstetrics, there could be a life at stake, or
two lives,
or some complication that could have lifelong effects. So you have to learn to think and react, but also to speak up because everyone else in the room is looking to you as the doctor to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and to get everybody corralled and moving in the same direction at the same time.
And you can't be iffy or you can't come out with the, well, maybe we will do this or could we do this? It has to be,
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, as we wind down our first episode, our first show for season 2, I thought what we would do to kind of wrap things up is to do just a short little rapid fire review. You guys are going to be fine. Follow my lead. So I'm just going to go through some of the topics that we did in season 1 and that we covered with our other shows. And then each of you just either give a word that comes to mind or just a thought about that show or about the topic that is mentioned. So there's no right, there's no wrong. You're just going to speak up with your unique voice. So episode 1, which was our one and only video episode from season 1. So Dr. Green, you go first. What's your one word or your one thought about that episode?
That was fun. It was fun. I still remember it was fun.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Guthrie?
Friendship, because it kind of summarized how we got to know each other as colleagues and friends over the years.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Episode number 2, of course, the world changed, and it was COVID-19. That was our first COVID-19 show.
Uncertainty. That was probably, now we can kind of reflect on it a year later and see how far we've come, but remember that feeling, that feeling of uncertainty and trying to give some guidance, not only to ourselves, but our staff and whoever else was listening.
I was going to say unknown, but unknown in the future, like how things are going to end up. We had this serious disease that was killing people and we didn't know what to do. We were learning as we went along. So that was
Then our next topic, we took a left turn and just went totally to somewhere else. We talked about sugar. Dr. Guthrie, you go first this time.
Still struggling. I finished off a Heath Bar, Klondike Heath Bar pack last night. I ate the last one. I said, okay, not buying anymore. That's it. Still struggling.
The struggle is real. It is real. That's, well. I still like my chocolate. What can I say?
Okay. Then we took a right turn from there and we talked about menopause.
There are too many words to think of menopause. It's here I am, and I did not know this is what it was.
Mm-hmm. I can relate.
Living through it.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's living through it.
It's a process.
And it's not so much the recognized symptoms. Those, like everybody knows about hot flashes and night sweats. It's the other stuff
that they don't tell you.
That they don't tell you about. Yes.
And then, because of everything happening, we actually did 3 episodes in a row, all on COVID-19. I don't know if you all want to add anything to COVID. COVID is COVID.
It's education. That's what it was.
Yeah. It was education, and we, as much as we tried to stray away from it, we had to talk about it because it is what it
It
is.
is what it
It was
is.
evolving. It was learning. It was a process. So
Mhm.
we were going through it, and we wanted to get everybody else to go through it with
Mhm.
us and help them.
Hmm. Then our next show after those three was LBL, Little Bladder Leaks. Green?
Been there, done that.
So I resemble that statement. Dr. Guthrie?
Just learning more about it to help women more about it.
Mhm.
That's-
Hmm. And let's see, after LBL, we did a show on technology and medicine. Dr. Guthrie? We talked about telemedicine
yeah.
and video,
that's
all
right.
of the, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, how medicine has just changed so much, you know, and how things from this point on are not going back to where they were. That's you know. So
Mhm.
telemedicine will be a part of
What we do.
what we do from now on.
Hmm.
I still think the younger generation is a little bit better at it than we are. Whenever we have our little phone calls and I log on, they're going to be there. 40 and up, plus or minus.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're
We're
trying to
working
get
on it.
there. We're trying to get there. Then we did went back to hormones and menopause. So probably just more of the same.
Mhm.
So you're just looking. Then we did a show on healthy choices during COVID-19. And I remember we talked about diet, exercise, you know, meditation, just how to
Right.
survive it all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The lockdown made us recognize that, we had to do something to kind of help our stress levels.
True.
So it's one thing to say, stop eating all the Heath bars, but there's other things you got to do too.
Right. Anything else on that one?
No, just again learning how to deal with stress,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
and not let it overtake you.
Mhm. Then we again pivoted and hit something that's in all of our wheelhouse from a professional standpoint. We did a show on robotic surgery. Dr. Guthrie.
Yes. So again, love it. Definitely want to keep it in my practice, and hoping to learn more about it. So and do more.
Mm-hmm.
We have new technology that we're getting trained on.
Yeah,
So that's,
we'll talk-
we're excited about
we're
that.
excited about that.
We'll talk about that in some other shows.
Glad about that. Yeah, it's exciting. It's new stuff, and I'm glad my brain can still learn new stuff.
We did a show on stress during protest and pandemic.
This year was stressful. We talked a lot about stress.
That's why
Stress
when I look-
incontinence, stress in food, stress in the pandemic.
Yes.
Stress.
Yes.
No, from May to December, it was
Yes.
just. No, excuse me, May to Jan. Who can forget January?
Right. Yep.
I kept thinking, okay, November's going to come and it's going to be
Get
different.
better. Yeah.
And then December was going to come and it was going to be different, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was just.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next topic, which was quarantine fatigue.
The Rona. We were tired of the Rona.
Oh, the Rona. We were over it. We were all over it. And then the last few episodes, I think we were all trying to, because, we've been on this roller coaster along with everybody else. And this was, I remember, around the holiday season. And, to Dr. Guthrie's point, we kept thinking things were going to get better. And, we were saying to ourselves, we could just stay right here in this funk, of the quarantine fatigue. But maybe we can bring ourselves out of it. And if so, maybe we can help some other people. So we did a show on what brings you joy.
Still my family.
Friends and family,
Mm-hmm.
and outside it, and being active.
Mhm.
That's what
And then we finished up the year with a show on Grateful. And again, the reason why I didn't want to do the rapid fire is because I knew what was coming up, so it wouldn't really be spontaneous for me. But at least with the Grateful, I think, finishing out our season 1 with a show on being grateful, I think was a good way to try to put all of everything in perspective that had happened the previous 12 months from a political standpoint, social standpoint. There were those of us, within our ranks who suffered loss. Wasn't necessarily COVID related, but we had loss of family. So it was a year.
Mm-hmm.
It was a year, and because of the restrictions in our ability to connect, personally, it really added to that struggle. So I was really glad when I reviewed the topics to see, well, at least we tried to, bring it back up, go for the light, look to the light. And we ended our show on being grateful, our season rather, on being grateful with that last show. And I remain grateful. I remain grateful for my partners. I remain grateful that we have a practice, that we survived, through the pandemic. We were able to keep our staff, keep everybody with us. Our patients came back in once some of the lockdown restrictions were lifted. So I'm grateful that we came out of that year in season 1, and I'm super excited about everything we've got going or planning for season 2. Any other closing thoughts, ladies?
I agree. It was definitely a good way to end what was a kind of as you said, roller coaster year, because it allowed us to reflect and also realize that, because of the crazy year, we realized what was really important to us. Mm-hmm. And so, because that is always important to us, I think it brought that to the forefront that, despite, but God, it all came back to family, friends, our practice, our employees, just the little things, that just really was important because it allowed us to focus a little more on that, and, put that at the forefront of, our minds. We would get to a time of the year where we're thinking about it, but we knew it was going to be different. We knew the season at the end of the year was going to be very different from previous Thanksgivings and Christmases and New Year's.
Yeah, when we did the episode, didn't know at that point that I would lose a family member, but just grateful for the time that I had, and again, just trying to keep positive, about we're coming out of this. We're going to come out of this. We're going to do better. We're going to be better.
Yeah. So we want to thank you all for listening to our Finding Our Voice, and also a little trip down memory lane from season 1. Please continue to listen, to log on to our website at www.ptcobgyn.com. Look for us wherever you find your podcasts. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram. So please check us out. We've got much more to come this season. So we thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Miranda Williams.
I'm Dr. Deanna Guthrie.
And I'm Dr. Karen Green. Take good care.